It was Thanksgiving weekend. The house was quiet. The children were asleep. And somewhere inside that estate, one of the most expensive properties in Florida, a woman stood in the darkness holding a 9-iron golf club, not because she was practicing. The man behind the wheel of that SUV had just crashed into a fire hydrant and a neighbor's tree. He lay barely conscious on the asphalt. His name was Tiger Woods, the most famous athlete on the planet. A man worth over $1 billion. A man with a smile so recognizable it had been printed on cereal boxes, billboards, and the covers of magazines in 43 countries. And the woman standing over him, her hands trembling, her eyes dry, not because she wasn't in pain, but because she had already decided what she was going to do, was his wife. What happened next was not in any script. Not the fairy tale wedding script. Not the Nike endorsement script. Not the press release that Tiger's team would spend the next 72 hours desperately trying to write. Because the story that came out over the following weeks, the texts, the voicemails, the names, the word soulmate said to a woman who was not his wife, didn't just end a marriage. It ended an era. It cracked open a myth. And it revealed a woman that the world had completely underestimated. If you've ever wondered what real strength looks like, not the loud kind, not the dramatic kind, but the kind that moves in silence and lands like a thunderbolt, stay with this story. It might be the most important 22 minutes you'll spend today. If this story already has your attention, drop a comment right now. What's the one word you'd use to describe Elin Nordegren? Just one word. We'll read every single one. And if you're new here, this channel exists to tell the stories that the headlines got wrong. The real ones. The ones underneath. If that's the kind of story you're looking for, hit subscribe. We're just getting started. To understand what happened in that driveway, you have to understand what Tiger Woods was built to be. He didn't become famous. He was engineered for it. His father, Earl Woods, a former Green Beret with a deep belief in his son's destiny, began training Tiger before the boy could read. By the age of 2, Tiger was swinging a golf club. By 3, he was on television, putting against Bob Hope on the Mike Douglas show. The audience laughed with delight. Nobody called it unusual. Because Tiger made it look natural. He made everything look natural. He won the U.S. Amateur Championship 3 consecutive times, a feat no one had managed before him. He turned professional in 1996 with a Nike deal worth $40 million and a single statement that became prophecy. Hello, world. He was 20 years old. He meant every word. By 1997, he had won the Masters by 12 strokes. 12. In a sport where winning by 2 strokes is considered dominant, Tiger didn't just win. He made everyone else seem like they were playing a different game. He was named Sportsman of the Year. Then again. And again. The trophies didn't stack, they multiplied. Slow zoom on Tiger on the green. Crowds. Confetti. The iconic fist pump, replayed thousands of times in thousands of living rooms around the world. But fame at that altitude does something to a person. It doesn't just elevate them, it isolates them. Because when you are the most watched human being in your field, you exist in a kind of controlled reality. Your life is choreographed. Your image is managed. Your interviews are vetted. Your smile is a product. And underneath all of it, beneath the product, beneath the brand, beneath the perfect swing in the Nike contracts and the magazine covers, there was a young man who had been raised to perform, not just on the golf course, but everywhere. What Tiger needed privately was the opposite of performance, and for a time it seemed like he had found it. Moshul, first glimpse of Elin, blonde hair, careful smile. A dinner in 2001. She was working as a nanny for the family of a Swedish golfer. She was not looking to be famous. She was not in his world. She was, in the truest sense, outside of it. Her name was Elin Maria Pernia Nordegren. She was 21 years old. She was studying psychology at a university in Sweden. She had a twin sister. She had plans that had nothing to do with professional golf. Tiger, by most accounts, had to work to get her attention. He reportedly asked a mutual friend to help arrange an introduction. She was reportedly reluctant. She had heard about his reputation. She was not naive. But she also, by the accounts of those who knew her, saw something in him that others didn't, or maybe couldn't, because they were too busy looking at the brand. They dated quietly. For over a year, the relationship was almost entirely out of the press. Tiger was protective of it. That protectiveness to Elin looked like respect. It looked like privacy. It looked like a man who valued something real over something public. On October 5th, 2004, they were married at the Sandy Lane Resort in Barbados. The ceremony was so private that guests were reportedly asked to sign non-disclosure agreements. Tiger was 32 years old. Elin was 24. They were, by all visible evidence, a couple who had chosen each other deliberately. They built a life. They had 2 children, Sam, born in 2007, and Charlie, born in 2009. They expanded their Florida estate into something close to a private compound. Tiger played golf and won. Elin raised their children and studied for the degree she would eventually earn. From the outside, it looked exactly like the story was supposed to look. But there is a particular kind of silence that precedes an earthquake. And the people closest to that silence often don't recognize it. Because silence is also what peace sounds like. The affair, or rather, the affairs, had been going on for years. Not 1. Not 2. Eventually, by the time the full picture assembled itself in the weeks after that Thanksgiving crash, the number would reach into the double digits. More than a dozen women would come forward, or be named, or be documented through phone records and voicemails and text messages that made their way to tabloids, lawyers, and eventually the public record. The first name that broke through the noise was Rachel Uchitel, a New York nightclub hostess who had connections to the celebrity world and whose name appeared in the National Enquirer days after the crash. Her publicist initially denied everything. Then, the denial stopped. Then came the others. A cocktail waitress from Orlando. A reality TV contestant. A neighbor, women from different cities, different backgrounds, different years of Tiger's marriage. Each one a thread in a pattern that had been hidden in plain sight. Text message on a phone screen. The words blurred, but the voiceover reads from what was later reported. One of the most devastating pieces of evidence, and the one that would become the emotional center of the story, was a voicemail. Tiger had allegedly left a message for one of the women, urging her to change her contact name in her phone because his wife had been checking his phone records. The voicemail was recorded. It circulated. It was played on news broadcasts around the world. And then there was the word that surfaced in the coverage of his relationship with Uchitel specifically. The word that Elin reportedly heard, or read, or was told about, that crossed a line that none of the other revelations had quite reached. Soulmate. He had used that word. According to reports at the time, Tiger had described Uchitel using language that implied depth. Connection. Something beyond physical. Something that, to a wife with 2 children in a marriage she believed was real, didn't sound like weakness. It sounded like a choice. Think about that for a second. There is a particular cruelty in that word, when used in that context. Affairs of the body are survivable by some marriages, but affairs of the vocabulary, using words reserved for your partner to describe someone else, that is a different kind of wound entirely. I want to ask you something, and there's no wrong answer. When you heard that word, soulmate, did something shift for you in this story? Tell us in the comments what you felt in that moment. Because I think this is where people's reactions split. We don't know exactly when Elin found out or how the information reached her. What we know is that the night of Thanksgiving 2009, something happened inside that house that ended with Tiger Woods getting into his Cadillac Escalade at 2:30 in the morning and driving it into a fire hydrant at the end of his own driveway. The official story, filed with police days later, was that he had been distracted, that Elin had been trying to help him, that she had smashed the rear window of the SUV with a golf club to get him out after the crash. Nobody fully believed the official story. But more importantly, nobody could disprove it. And Tiger, who refused 3 consecutive requests to be interviewed by the Florida Highway Patrol, used the privacy laws of a celebrity to stay sealed inside the narrative he had chosen. For 72 hours, the world waited. And in that silence, Elin was already thinking. This is the part of the story that the tabloids couldn't narrate. Because the tabloids needed chaos, And what Elin was doing was the opposite of chaos. She retained legal representation immediately. She was, remember, a woman who had been studying psychology. She was not someone who would mistake emotional devastation for an inability to think. She was also not someone who had ever wanted to be defined by someone else's story. While Tiger's PR team was drafting statements, while the press was camped at the end of the driveway, while Rachel Ucatel was reportedly offered a financial settlement to stay quiet, while the sponsors, Nike, Gatorade, AT&T, Gillette, were holding emergency calls, Elin was doing something that none of them were doing. She was negotiating. Let the word sit. The original prenuptial agreement between Tiger and Elin had reportedly been worth somewhere between $5 and $20 million in the event of divorce. It was, by any standard, an enormous sum. By the standard of Tiger's actual net worth, then estimated at close to $1 billion, it was a fraction. And Elin's lawyers knew that. And Elin knew that, and perhaps most importantly, the world now knew that Tiger had a problem. Not just a private one, a reputational one, a sponsor one, a brand one. Because the myth of Tiger Woods was not just personal, it was commercial infrastructure. And that infrastructure had just developed an enormous invisible crack. The leverage was real, and Elin used it with a precision that, in retrospect, was almost architectural. Accenture dropped him within days. Gillette announced it would reduce his role. AT&T eventually ended the relationship. Tag Heuer paused. Gatorade discontinued a Tiger-branded drink. The financial damage to his commercial empire was estimated at between $100 and $200 million in the first 12 months alone. And amid all of that, Elin was quiet. Publicly. Completely quiet. She did not give interviews. She did not release a statement. She did not appear on television looking tragic or noble or betrayed. She disappeared from the public eye so completely that her absence became a presence. The world was watching Tiger. Elin was working. In February 2010, Tiger gave a formal public apology, a televised, controlled, carefully worded statement delivered before a small audience of golf colleagues and family members. He spoke of his Buddhism. He spoke of his upbringing. He spoke of his entitlement. He did not take unscripted questions. He wept. Elin was not in the room. She had chosen, deliberately, not to stand beside him in that moment, that ritual of public repair that has become a feature of American celebrity scandal, in which the wife stands at the podium and her presence implies forgiveness. Elin denied him that image. She understood, intuitively or strategically, that her presence would have transferred some of her credibility to his rehabilitation. She withheld it. There's something almost incomprehensible about that level of composure in that moment. If you've ever had to hold yourself together when everything inside you was breaking, hit the like button on this video. Because what Elin did here deserved to be witnessed. On August 23rd, 2010, Tiger Woods and Elin Nordegren's divorce was finalized. The settlement figure was never officially confirmed, but the numbers that circulated across legal circles, celebrity journalism, and financial analysis ranged from $100 million to $750 million. Some reports placed the settlement closer to $300 million. Others went higher. What was confirmed? It was one of the largest celebrity divorce settlements in history, and Elin had negotiated it under conditions of maximum public pressure on the man she was divorcing. She did not do this out of revenge. Or at least, if there was anger in it, it was disciplined anger, anger that had been metabolized into strategy. She had 2 children. She had a future. She had her own intelligence. And she was going to use all of it. After the divorce, Elin did something that, in the culture of celebrity scandal, was almost radical. She went back to school. Not as a gesture. Not as a headline. But because she had started a degree in psychology before the marriage had consumed her time, and she intended to finish it. In 2014, she graduated from Rollins College in Florida with a degree in psychology. She had been studying during the marriage. She had been studying through the scandal. She had been studying while negotiating one of the largest divorce settlements in history. She did not become a celebrity psychologist. She did not write a memoir. She did not go on a press tour. She did not brand herself as the survivor of Tiger Woods. She built a quiet life in Florida, centered on Sam and Charlie. She was photographed occasionally at their soccer games, their school events. She looked, and this is the detail that struck everyone who observed her, genuinely happy. Not performed happy. Not brave face happy. The kind of happy that takes time and intention and a willingness to rebuild from the inside. Tiger's story after the scandal was its own documentary. The physical collapse, the prescription drug arrest, the golf career interrupted by back surgery so severe that doctors told him he might never play competitively again. And then, the 2019 Masters, one of the most watched sporting events of that decade, in which Tiger Woods won his 5th green jacket 15 years after his 4th. The world responded with a complex emotion, something between triumph and unease. Because by then, the public had been forced to hold two things simultaneously: the greatness of the athlete and the knowledge of the man behind the brand. Elin watched from a distance. She did not comment. She never has. Memorable A-Press photo, Elin and Tiger at a school event for their children. They are standing near each other. They are smiling, carefully, in the way that two people who share children and history and scars learn to do. They are, by all visible evidence, co-parents. Nothing more. She remarried in 2022 to Jordan Cameron, a former NFL tight end. They had a daughter together. She moved further from the public eye. The story that had defined her in the eyes of the world, the wife betrayed, the woman in the driveway with the golf club, became a smaller and smaller part of the full picture of her life. Which is, of course, exactly what she had been working toward. So what is this story, really? It is easy to tell it as a scandal, as a cautionary tale about fame and fidelity and the gap between public image and private reality. And all of that is in the story. But the part that lasts, the part that doesn't fade with the news cycle, is the part about Elin. Because we live in a culture that has a very specific script for betrayed women, the script goes: you fall apart publicly, you lean on sympathetic friends, you give the interview in which you cry and then show your resilience, you eventually forgive, or you don't. And either way, you become a character in someone else's story. Elin refused the script. Jewel. Archive footage. News anchors speculating. Magazine covers. Paparazzi staking out her house. The machinery of celebrity journalism trying to consume her story and failing because she wouldn't feed it. She gave them nothing to work with. Not because she was cold, but because she understood, perhaps more clearly than anyone in that situation before her, that her story belonged to her, that her pain was hers, that her recovery was hers, that her children were hers, that her future was hers, and she protected all of it. The $750 million, or whatever the true figure was not victory in the sense that Hollywood would frame it. It was not revenge. It was not compensation for the unquantifiable. It was, if anything, the translation of grief and betrayal into the practical language of security. Security for her children. Freedom for herself. A foundation built not on what had been done to her, but on what she was going to do next. And what she did next, the degree, the quiet life, the eventual new marriage, the refusal to make her healing a public performance, is arguably the most radical act in this entire story, because in a world that profits from other people's pain, choosing to grieve privately, to rebuild without an audience, to live without a narrative arc that satisfies the press, that is its own kind of strength. Not louder than the crash, not more dramatic than the revelation, but more lasting, more real. The man called another woman his soulmate. And the woman who heard that word didn't shatter. She sharpened. There is no tidy ending to this story, because real lives don't have them. Tiger Woods continued to exist, brilliant, complicated, diminished, and elevated by turns. Elin Nordegren continued to exist, building something quiet and solid and her own. Their children grew up, and the word soulmate, spoken in secret to a woman who was not his wife, became part of the public record. A small word that carried enormous weight. A word that told one woman exactly what she needed to know, not just about the man she had married, but about the kind of story she was going to refuse to tell. The world called her the wronged wife. She called herself something else. something she never said publicly, which is fitting, because some definitions are private, and some people earn the right to keep them that way. What does Elin's story mean to you? Not the tabloid version, but this one. Leave your answer in the comments. The people in this community ask better questions than any press conference ever did. If you watch this channel, you already know we don't tell stories the way the headlines tell them. We go underneath. We stay with the people. We ask what something meant, not just what happened. If that's the kind of storytelling you come back to, then you're exactly who this channel was built for. And the next story is already almost ready.